This week on Christian World News, this pastor has led more than 1,500 Muslims to Christ in Sweden. Hear how her story of escape is leading others to spiritual freedom.
Plus, in the U.S., hundreds of thousands of government workers are working without pay. As they struggle to meet their needs, the church is stepping in to help.
And a global Christian organization is sending young believers to Palestinian territories who then go back to their churches and spread anti-Israel propaganda. Hello everyone, welcome to this week's edition of Christian World News. I'm George Thomas.
And I'm Wendy Griffith. Well, Kurdistan is often referred to as the other Iraq. It's located in the north. Kurdistan is an autonomous area controlled by Kurds. Since 2014, Kurdish soldiers have fought alongside U.S. and coalition forces to drive the jihadi ISIS army from thousands of miles of territory in Syria and Iraq. Now, with the U.S. planned exit from neighboring Syria, many Kurds are once again worried about their long-term future.
CBN contributor Chuck Holton joins us from the Kurdish capital of Erbil. Chuck, you had a chance to visit a small church in Erbil that's led by American missionaries. Describe your experience.
Yeah, fascinating church service this morning, George. It's run by a couple who moved here about 9 years ago. He's a former Marine and went to seminary and became a pastor and felt led to come here and start a church. Now, this church probably had 50 or 60 people in the service this morning, and I would say that there were at least 20 or 25 different countries represented there as they cater to expats that are in this community, and there are lots of expats here in Erbil, as you well know. The most interesting thing, however, was the Iraqi members of this church, guys that I was talking to who are either Kurdish or Iraqi or even Iranian that are here who are former Muslims. And in talking to one of them, what he told me was that the reason that he converted from Islam he became an atheist and then eventually to Christianity was because of ISIS. He said that after seeing the brutality that was, demonstrated by ISIS since 2014 in this area, he just couldn't stand the thought that they called themselves Muslims. And he said that there were many Muslims who felt the same way and who are now seeking a better faith, a more loving faith.
And so you're saying that more Muslims are open to hearing about Jesus because of what they saw their fellow co-religionists do in the name of Islam against them.
That's exactly right. And as a matter of fact, there were quite a few young men at the church this morning who were not Christians yet, but they were there just seeking. They were listening. They were reading the Bible and trying to get their questions answered. Some of them have seen visions, and others are, like I say, the pastor said, many of them are just so disgusted. He said that that's a general consensus here in Kurdistan. So many people are disgusted by the incredible brutality that was demonstrated by ISIS, that the pendulum is kind of swinging the other way. And it seems like this culture is even throwing off those cultural norms even more than the religious ones. So the women wearing the hijab, I see fewer and fewer women here in northern Iraq. We just came from the mall a little while ago, and I was really surprised at just how Western the dress is from the women here. It's always been that way to some extent, as you know, in Kurdistan, because it's a very cosmopolitan area that is very accepting of other faiths, although they're majority Sunni. They have Yazidi, they have Druze, and they have Assyrian Christians, and all different sorts of believers here. But it's just surprising to me how Western the culture is beginning to become.
Chuck, real quickly, last few seconds. The Kurds have long desired to have their own homeland. Is that still a reality for them?
I mean, it's probably not a reality anytime soon because Iran is very deeply in control of Iraq. And they don't want that to happen. The Syrians certainly don't want that to happen. The Turks don't want it to happen. I think if the United States were to get behind them having their own homeland, they might have a chance. But as they say here, the Americans will always do the right thing once they've expended all other options.
Thank you.
Back to you, George.
Thank you. We need to leave it right there. Chuck Holton coming to us from Erbil. Stay safe, my friend.
All right, we'll see you.
Wendy?
All right. Huge numbers of Muslims are fleeing the Middle East and seeking refuge in Sweden. Some of those immigrants are a threat to the nation, but one is bringing a blessing to her adopted country. Anahita Parson pastors 2 Christian churches, and she's led more than 1,500 Muslims to Christ. Dale Hurd brings us her story from Stockholm.
No one would have thought a Muslim woman in Iran simply trying to stay alive in an abusive marriage would one day lead 2 churches in Sweden, lead more than 1,000 former Muslims to Christ, and be invited to speak before the Queen of Sweden. As a young woman in a Muslim culture, Anahita Parson was powerless and insignificant. Her only hope was that she might one day find a good husband, and she did. But he died suddenly in an accident, and she found herself trapped in a second marriage so violent she expected to die.
I didn't know anything. It was darkness. It was a very bad life.
Although she writes about the abuse in her book Stranger No More, Parson doesn't like to talk about it.
It's not easy about speak about that.
You were beaten with a shovel.
Yes.
As a battered wife, living with bruises and cuts all over her body, Parson eventually tried to kill herself with pills, but she was revived at a hospital. Anahita's daughter Roxana remembers when her dad threatened to slit her throat when she was just a small child.
I remember we had gotten cookies. My mom baked cookies, so we got cookies. And then we went for another turn, like we wanted more cookies. Super normal. And we ran up and we're like, more cookies, more cookies. And he came up with a knife, put it to my throat, and he said, ask for cookies again. She was striving to just survive for us, just survive to make a better life for us. And maybe that was something God had implanted in her so that she would have something to hold on to.
Anahita Parson's journey to Christ and across 2 continents is the stuff of Hollywood movies, and one that would include several brushes with death. Parson, her husband, and 2 children fled Iran through the mountains to Turkey in 1984, where she and Roxana faced more brushes with death before landing in Turkey's notorious Agri prison. They would finally make it to Denmark, where she divorced her still abusive husband, and she heard the gospel for the first time. Then she moved to Sweden, where she and her 2 children would walk into a church and announce that we are Christians from now on. Anahita entered the ministry in 2012 and has led more than 1,500 Muslims to Christ. She not only leads 2 churches, but trains other churches on how to reach and disciple former Muslims like these, who fill her church each Sunday, hungry for the God who loves. Parson believes this was foretold in Jeremiah chapter 49, verse 39. But in the latter days I will restore the fortunes of Elam, declares the Lord.
It is about Elam, and Elam is Persian. When I read that, I know it. It's about us. It's about our life. And it's amazing. God told Jeremiah that time, and it's happened just now.
But Muslim immigration has also made Sweden a home for dangerous radicals. And Parson told us she's received death threats and lives with the knowledge she could be killed.
It's a free country, but it's dangerous too.
Were you saying that sometimes you wonder if it's your last day?
Sometimes.
As a young woman living what seemed like a hopeless existence in Iran, Anahita Parson saw no plan and no purpose in her abusive marriage, only random violence. But God had a plan for her to one day be a leading pastor in Sweden.
I think God loved me, and He was in my life from the beginning. He's my everything. I think it's, wow, it's beautiful.
Dale Hurd, CBN News in Stockholm, Sweden.
the beauty of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Thank you, Dale. Radical Islamists want Pakistan's Supreme Court to reconsider their decision of acquitting Asia Bibi, the Christian woman charged with blasphemy. Bibi spent 8 years on death row for allegedly insulting the Prophet Muhammad. The court acquitted her last October. Next week, the court's top judges will review a petition put forward by Islamists seeking to overturn the court's decision. Bibi's acquittal sparked days of deadly riots by radical Muslims who called for her death. The 48-year-old mother remains in hiding in Pakistan.
Coming up, America's capital in crisis. Hundreds of thousands of workers aren't getting paid. How this local church is stepping up.
CBN presents The I Wills of God, your path to overcoming fear and anxiety.
We're going to talk about some of the incredible promises God has made to His children.
In Pat Robertson's newest teaching, you'll discover the I wills of God. I will rescue him, protect him, answer him, be with him in trouble, deliver him, honor him, satisfy him with long life, show him my salvation, and see amazing stories of God's promises in action.
What I felt was loved and treasured.
God spared my life twice in 3 days.
The good Lord had given me a second chance.
Break free from stress and despair.
The Lord doesn't want you to live in fear, but to know the rewards given to those who love God.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit cbn.com. The I Wills of God, your path to overcoming fear and anxiety.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. My husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphans Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
Christians in Venezuela are taking up the fight for the country's future in prayer. Evangelicals are rallying and praying for their nation, asking God to bring peace and return Venezuela to democracy. Meanwhile, interim President Juan Guaido says he would consider granting amnesty to President Nicolas Maduro and his allies if they help return the country to constitutional order. Guaido is backed by the U.S. and Venezuela's National Assembly, who say Maduro stole the recent election. President Maduro claims he's the rightfully elected leader of Venezuela and shows no signs of giving up power.
The United States is facing its own government crisis. About 800,000 federal workers have not been paid in more than a month. It's all because Democrats in Congress and the president cannot agree on a budget. The president wants $5 billion for a border wall. The Democrats say no. So about 25% of the government is not being funded. The workers are caught in the middle.
I received my last paycheck December 31st.
I haven't been paid in over 33 days. At what point do I resign from this agency? I can't continue to afford to fund my family out of my savings and continue to pay for myself to go to work.
With no end in sight to this crisis, churches are standing in the gap to help those workers until they start getting a paycheck again.
I work for the Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security,
NASA. I work for the Department of Treasury, Internal Revenue Service, 35 years.
Rinse and repeat. These furloughed workers are going on their 5th week without a paycheck.
Let me try to help. Come on, I got it.
And in a Maryland suburb of Washington, D.C., thousands have passed through the doors of First Baptist Church of Glen Ardent seeking help.
When we first opened our doors to give to the community, we saw the impact because there's a line of 100 or so cars.
Can I see your ID?
Sure.
All right.
These are people who are coming who are not used to having to ask for assistance.
Oh, already bagged.
The church prepared 3,000 bags.
So there's a little bit of bread.
A week's worth of food.
We have rice, tuna.
It's a bunch of stuff that I have about 17 recipes and I can make a whole bunch of meals from.
While the food is welcome,
let her tears be tears of joy, Lord.
Glen Arden offers so much more.
And let us be thankful and grateful, Lord, because this is only temporarily.
And with the prayers,
thank you.
Lots
thank you.
And lots of hugs.
I remember you.
Ebony Griffin came in to get a bag of groceries and decided to stay and volunteer. This is her second day handing out supplies.
It's been a blessing. It's been a comfort to be able to pray for individuals and just give hugs and support and share the Word of God.
And she's not the only one.
As a federal furloughed employee myself, I felt the need to come out and show compassion to the people coming in, to let them know that we're all in this together.
Along with helping to keep bellies fed, this church is also holding special programming to help furloughed workers stay emotionally and spiritually strong during these uncertain times.
We want to make sure that we're just being the hand of God in the community, helping to reach out to people. And our pastor's focus for this year is doing life together. And what better way to do life together is to do life with the community, is to help give life, literally.
Reggie Sidnor says he's thankful the church is supporting furloughed workers like him, but he's ready for Congress and the president to reopen the government.
It's funny you would hear somebody say, well, I can't wait to get back to work, and that's just how I feel right now.
Until then, volunteers and fellow furloughed workers like Sandra Bolding will share blessings and the hope that only God can provide.
Yes, love conquers all. Yes, it does. It does.
Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Upper Marlboro, Maryland.
Coming up, the international program that some say is sending young Christians to deliver anti-Israel propaganda to their churches.
Parents, the Superbook Bible app is a great way to get your child reading the Bible, because in today's busy world, we can use some help. The free Superbook Bible app has fun stuff your kids will love. They'll have a blast learning the Bible, playing great games, watching cool videos, discovering heroes in the Bible. They'll have fun while they learn God's Word. The Superbook Kids Bible app, available now.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Discover the I wills of God. I will rescue him, protect him, answer him, be with him in trouble, deliver him, honor him, satisfy him with long life, show him my salvation.
What I felt was loved and treasured.
God spared my life twice in 3 days.
The good Lord had given me a second chance.
Call 1-800-700-7000 or visit CBN.com. The I wills of God, the latest teaching from Pat Robertson.
The World Council of Churches says it's about inclusiveness and Christian unity. But a new report claims the organization is also behind a very controversial program.
Yeah, reportedly young Christians are being sent to the West Bank as observers, but returned home as anti-Israel advocates. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl has that story from Jerusalem.
This effort is called the Ecumenical Accompaniment Program in Palestine and Israel, or EAPPI. The World Council of Churches started the program in 2002. Since then, it's sent some 1,800 volunteers to the West Bank to witness what it calls life under occupation. These volunteers then head home to tell churches, congregations, and others about it. Those presentations often take a very negative and even anti-Semitic tone.
It has got nothing to do with it. It is mainly a political warfare. It is mainly driven by the Zionists. It is a Zionist ideology to try and drive every Palestinian out of that land to create a Jewish state.
The WCC denounces anti-Semitism as a sin against God, and spokesperson Peter Prove tells CBN News that the program is all about human rights.
The ultimate purposes of the program are to address human rights violations, impacts upon human dignity, and to promote, on the positive side, a just peace for both peoples.
A report by the NGO Monitor, however, paints a different picture of these so-called training camps.
And that is the main tool for training anti-Israel activists within church organizations and churches around the world. And it's also the main tool for inserting anti-Israel and anti-Zionist propaganda and rhetoric into those same churches.
According to Prove, the volunteers take part in everyday life with the Palestinians.
They're there to provide a protective presence. Secondly, they're there to observe, monitor, and report on events that they observe.
Jonas Schiffmiller said, NGO Monitor found there's more to the story.
In fact, what EAPPI is really doing is coming here, gaining credibility for themselves to go back to their home churches and to spread anti-Israel diatribes.
Yosef Daher is coordinator of the Jerusalem Center that hosts the volunteers. He explains how they view Jesus' command to love your enemies.
We look at the Israelis, of course, back home as our enemy. And we see that our enemy is in a sin against God and against humanity. And in order to show our love, if you love someone, you would love him to be free of his sin. So this is where we connected love with resistance.
Resistance usually refers to terrorism, but Daher said as Christians they only promote boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, or BDS. In response to the report, the WCC said it only promotes boycotting goods from Israeli settlements. That's not Daher's view.
Our call for sanctions is targeted at Israel.
The WCC recognizes Israel's right to exist according to international law, but doesn't connect it to the Bible. Dr. Robert Smith works with the volunteers and explained it earlier.
The biblical narrative of Israel has almost nothing to do with contemporary Israel other than the intentional manipulation of sacred text to justify a political project. The Global Kairos movement declared that any Christian theology that supports Zionism is heresy.
David Parsons is vice president of the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem. He described the 2009 Kairos Palestine Declaration as misguided.
For someone to brand Christian Zionism heresy, this is troubling ground because Jesus himself affirmed the restoration of Israel in Matthew 19. The Apostle Peter does it in Acts chapter 3, and Paul does it in Romans chapter 11. So these were all affirming a belief in biblical Zionism, the belief that the Jews would be restored to the land. So are you calling Jesus himself a heretic?
Funding for the volunteer training program comes from the World Council of Churches as well as European governments. NGO Monitor would like those countries to reevaluate that support and the WCC to recognize Israel's right to exist as a Jewish state. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
When you give, smiles grow bigger. When you care, homes are happier. When you comfort, the hurt goes away. When we all come together to love, miracles happen.
Hello, I'm Terry Newsom. Did you know there are more than 148 million orphans in the world today? 148 million. But it was 3 little girls that taught me about the plight of orphans. My husband and I spent nearly a month immersed in the daily activities of a Ukrainian orphanage as we waited to adopt 3 sisters. I saw firsthand the utter loneliness, the pain of rejection, and the overwhelming desire to be loved. That experience changed me forever. And out of it grew a ministry from my heart called Orphans Promise. Today, we're helping orphans and vulnerable children in more than 50 countries worldwide. Thousands of children are now in safe homes. They're being educated, and they're learning life skills. I'm asking you to join with me and become family to these children. Will you call the number on your screen right now? Because every child deserves a chance to be happy.
Hello? Is this thing on? Hey, kids, do you love games? And do you love discovering things? Well, do ya?
Then you're gonna love this. It's the new free Superbook Kids Bible app. You can play games, watch videos, find answers to your questions, and a whole lot more. The new Superbook Kids Bible app. Free downloads available on iTunes and Google Play now.
Welcome back. Well, Holocaust Remembrance Day is commemorated every January 27th. That's the anniversary of the liberation of the Auschwitz concentration camp.
Vera is a Holocaust survivor who lives in Israel. When she had a need, the Christian Broadcasting Network stepped in to help.
Vera is a widow and Holocaust survivor. Her family escaped the Minsk ghetto to join resistance fighters in the Belarusian wilderness.
There was very little food, and the winters were so cold. Many died in the snow, and there was constant fear of being discovered by the Nazis.
Vera told me that after the war, she married a fellow survivor. She and her husband wanted to leave Belarus, but couldn't get through the Iron Curtain. It wasn't until 1991 they were finally able to move to Israel.
It was a dream to come here, but it was hard to start a new life.
Vera's husband recently died from cancer. Her life got even harder one day when she came home to find the water pipes under her floor had burst.
Water was everywhere. Without my husband, I didn't know what to do. I could never afford the repairs. I was devastated.
So CBN Israel immediately located a contractor, and we covered the entire cost of the repairs.
I was so happy when you told me you were going to fix the pipes and my floor. I had tears of joy. You were my only hope to get it fixed and to have water back in my house. It's a miracle.
We also learned that Vera's oven quit working a few years ago, so we bought and installed a brand new one. Now, we also take her groceries regularly and spend time with her.
What you do for me and the other survivors means the world. You give real support, and it's wonderful to know that someone cares about us. I am so blessed to know people like you.
CBN doing great work around the world.
Indeed, we are.
Yeah.
Good being with you this Christian World News episode.
Thank you. Well, folks, that is it for this week's edition of Christian World News.
Until next week, from all of us here, goodbye and God bless you.